Hello and welcome everybody. Really excited about our webinar today. So it's Orchestra's first webinar for the Australian market this year for 2025. And I tell you what, FCAS, definitely a buzzword around the industry. We've had a huge amount of registrations today. It's really, really exciting. So we thought we would launch the entry of our 1 second FCAS into the Orchestra platform recently by bringing in a couple of other experts from around the industry to really dive into that today. So to look at it from a couple of different perspectives and get some experts in the room. And then we're going to have plenty of time for questions afterwards as well. So yeah, huge amount of registrations today. Thank you all for joining. So my name is Tyler Jackman. I'm the head of sales here at Orchestra. The agenda for today, I'm just going to give a very quick introduction to FCAS. So keep it very high level because we've got experts in the room that know a lot more than me about it. So I'm going to give a couple of slides there, and then we're going to hand over to PowerSync, who are going to give, I guess, the insight from the market participants' perspective. So Cliff's going to take over there. Then we're going to hand over to Evo Power, who's going to talk about it from the battery side. So what are the sort of technologies needed in this space to be able to deliver into the FCAS market? And then we're going to hand over to our own Chris Cooper, who's going to run through a bit of a demonstration in the Orchestra platform and show you what it looks like to model a project with FCAS and all the different markets that are involved there. And then at the end, we hopefully will have time. We've got a lot to get through today, but we'll hopefully have time for some Q&A. Down the bottom of the chat there, you can see there's a couple of different options in the bottom panel there. There's a Q&A and there's a chat. So please put your questions in the Q&A. We might be able to answer some of them on the fly, but we will have that time dedicated at the end. I'll be able to work through those questions and try and send them to the person that can answer them the best. And then if we can't get to all the questions today, we will be able to get back to you with responses later. So introducing our speakers today, first up, that's coming in after me, we're going to have the Chief Operating Officer of PowerSync, Clifford Hull, who's going to be giving a demonstration about exactly what is entangled in the depths of FCAS and how PowerSync is helping the market in that space. Then we're going to move over to Oliver Barnes from Evo, who's going to give us a few slides about the batteries, especially how Evo is helping deliver FCAS into the market as well. And then Chris is going to wrap up with a short demonstration and a couple more slides just to really sort of wrap this whole webinar up with the opportunities around the FCAS. So for those of you that don't know anything about Orchestra or are new to Orchestra, we are a feasibility modeling software. So we empower businesses to be able to very quickly and accurately model opportunities in the energy industry, specifically focused in the C&I sector. So we think it's very, very important for us to decarbonize. We need to get as many renewable energy projects out there as possible. And to do that, we help businesses by enabling them with the software that help them model it and be able to present that to the end client to make sure that these projects are moving forward. We do offer a free 3-week trial. So if any of you that haven't spoken to us before, feel free to book a demo or feel free to jump on and start a trial at any time, and we can help you get set up and model some of your first projects. Okay, so just a little overview. So there's probably a lot of people on the call today that know a lot about the FCAS market, but for those that don't, I just want to run over a little bit of entry-level stuff here and what it is. So contingency FCAS is a NEM mechanism. So it's ensuring the grid frequency is maintained when there's a sudden imbalance. So we look at that normal operating frequency around 50 hertz and a little bit of wiggle room each side of that. But when the frequency either dips or raises above that, we have what we call a frequency out of bounds event. So these are the events that occur that will trigger the opportunity for, in this case that we're talking about today, it could be anything that delivers any load, but in our case, we're talking about batteries. Batteries are excellent at providing support in both raise and lower events. So being able to deliver or charge in these events to help balance that grid frequency back out. So who's FCAS managed by? So FCAS is managed by AEMO, so it's via a market price mechanism. So I guess who can be registered? So who's registered in FCAS? It's all registered through AEMO. You either have to be an energy retailer or a market ancillary service provider or a MAS. What assets can participate in FCAS? So assets need to be registered in groupings known as DUIDs or dispatchable unit identifiers. They need a minimum of 1 megawatt capacity, and they must pass AEMO standards like for metering and monitoring compliance purposes. And then how do you bid in DUIDs in the market? So they are bid in basically to provide capacity irrespective of whether it's used or not. So that's the important thing. But there are some risks associated with not having that capacity when it is called on. So there are some fines that are in place from that if it's not there. So what are the different market categories? We've got 8 different categories in here, and very creative with the names of these categories. We've got exactly what they say on the screen there. We've got very fast, which is the most recent market that's opened up here with the 1 second raise and lower. We have fast, 6 seconds raise and lower, slow and delayed, so the 60-second and 5-minute. And what we've seen, and I'm sure Cliff is going to touch on this in a second in a lot more detail, is that where we're seeing the opportunity, especially from revenue and financial outcomes between these different markets, and where is the biggest opportunity and where does it sit for FCAS? So the 1 second market was launched back in October 2023. At Orchestra, we've been hearing a lot of feedback from our customers over the last year about when it's going to come into the tool. We just really wanted to have at least 12 months worth of data in there before we sort of launched it into the platform live. But yeah, it is a huge opportunity. We're very excited to show you today what it looks like in the platform and model it for you. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Cliff from PowerSync, who's going to have a bit more of a deep dive into the FCAS market and how PowerSync operates and how they can support their customers.
Thanks, Tyler.
Welcome, Cliff.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for joining. So as Tyler mentioned, the 1 second FCAS markets went live in October 2023. And if you look at the last calendar year of data, you'll see that the fast responses are generally dominating those revenue distributions. So given it's a market mechanism, these revenues do fluctuate year on year. As you can see, the revenue across the various states range from about 130K up to about $250,000 per megawatt for the calendar year 2024. And 46% of that was in the raise 1 second market. Another 20% in the raise 6 second markets. Interestingly, lower 1 second markets weren't quite as valuable, but lower 6 second accounted for another 17%. So a pretty significant portion of the market is in those fast responses. And to participate in those responses, for instance, for a 1 second market, you need to have the ability theoretically to go from 0 power to full discharge or full charge in less than half a second. And that involves all of the telemetry capture at the site, the control signals, everything. Pretty robust systems required in order to make that happen. So I've outlined here a few of the requirements as we see it for success in these markets. Firstly, and Ollie will talk to this in the next section, the battery selection does play a very important part in your ability to monetize these markets. The PCS or inverter in that battery system, in most cases, holds the actual response. We call it a droop curve, but it's essentially the response required to provide a compliant response to a frequency out of bounds event. And different battery manufacturers or PCSs come with different abilities, and the bid factor selection, which is a component or a setting in Orchestra when you model this, is impacted by this. The good thing is Evo has a 100% bid factor selection, so there's no derating of their capacity when you're taking that into market. The other two pieces that are really important are well, the next piece I should say is the telemetry and control side of things. Given these responses are happening very fast, you also need very high-speed metering and control systems at the site to ensure compliance. I guess as a bit of background, when one of these events, a frequency out of balance events, does occur, we're in market generally with our assets pretty much all the time. It's only when an event occurs and when we are required and do respond to an event. After the fact, there is an auditing process with AEMO to prove out assets within our GWID responded as they were intended to, and that whole process requires very accurate metering. And the carrot and stick, while those revenues look great, the stick is that the revenues could be recovered from you if you are found to be non-compliant. So all of those control and metering requirements factor into your ability in the approvals process with AEMO as a financially responsible market participant to register in the various markets. We're registered in all 8. So again, that's the markets for participation. That's a setting in the control profile when you're using Orchestra. Not all control systems will actually enable you to participate in all 8 of those markets. So it's very important, given the distribution of those revenues in those faster markets, that the systems you choose for control allow you to register for all of those. And then lastly, the optimizer piece, and this is something that PowerSync really has focused our development on. The different optimizers have different abilities to ensure uptime. As it's a capacity market, generally speaking, the more you're on, and the more you have a capacity in market, and particularly the better you are at forecasting when market price signals market price events, high price events may occur and release your capacity to participate in the market, the better your revenue capture. And that's factored into the revenue capture accuracy used by Orchestra, and ours, which I'll show on the next slide, is north of 85%. So this is just I guess a bit of market data. This is publicly available data from AEMO's next day dispatch logs that shows the various commercial and industrial battery VPPs and their participation in market. As we've shown, the raise 1 second markets are currently almost half the overall revenue for the entire FCAS pool. Our uptime, our capacity weighted uptime for our GWID is north of 84% in raise 1 second, and from a revenue weighted average, it's about 83% across those markets. And you can see our nearest competitor is sort of in the 26% or lower, and many of our competitors aren't even registered. Both of those factors come back to the revenue capture accuracy and the market participation that dramatically impact the financials that you'll see when you model this in Orchestra. So at the moment, we're tracking almost 6 or 7 times more revenue than our nearest competitor, and we're very proud of that fact. Just some quick couple slides just on, I guess, what it is that we do. So I've touched on some of these things and their importance in this solution, but we have a fairly modular solution across edge, cloud, and market. On the edge side, we provide that high speeds control and telemetry that's required to ensure compliance with the market ancillary services specification, and that's obviously required to enroll in the first instance, as well as maintain enrollment in those markets. On the cloud side, we have a multi-market co-optimizer that's been specifically designed for the Australian CNI sector, and I think it's one of the only optimizers in the market that would truly reflect the revenues that you can get out of Orchestra. We do, where participants are interested in modeling our solutions in Orchestra, we can actually work with the team at Orchestra and yourselves to provide the inputs we use that directly match our revenue capture capabilities. So that's the cloud. We also have some user interfaces that plug into that cloud piece. And then on the market side, we are a market participant. We are not an energy retailer, but as Tyler mentioned, there's the ancillary services provider / demand response service provider category. We are registered and capable of monetizing in both wholesale and FCAS revenues via our market participant status. And lastly, I think I guess we're here to support. So we definitely appreciate participants who or attendees who aren't yet connected with us to reach out. We generally, for the sake of clarity, we're not a delivery arm, so we're looking to enable customers that are looking to deploy these assets, whether they're end customers or engineering, procurement, and construction firms, and we can help with that business casing insofar as if and we highly recommend you sign up with Orchestra if you haven't yet, but you can use Orchestra to very accurately model the revenues that PowerSync can capture, and we can help from I guess integrating with the OEM, and then the ongoing operation and settlements piece. That's where we come in. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Cliff. Perfect. We're going to hand over now. We'll have a lot of question time at the end. So I see a lot of questions coming through already, which I'm probably going to point directly at you, Cliff, when it gets to that time. But introducing Oliver Barnes from Evo Power. Ollie, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. So yeah, just to jump straight into it. Evo's an Australian battery integrator, and I think that's a really key point. We have designed our systems locally with local resources for local conditions, local markets, right? And so that journey that we've gone on, we can take you through too. That starts with, the commercial, I guess, contacts, which would be myself in the technical support at first commercial touch point, as well as an account manager for day-to-day conversations and, I guess, contracting, all that sort of stuff. After that, we go into, you'd get handed over to our projects team, which will handle all of the important things you need to know about the site, because the site is, you want to get all your work done before you head to site, right? Getting the right parties involved, like PowerSync, making sure you have a good financial model, all that stuff. So we can handle all of that. Once you get to the product deployment, we've got everything in-house locally for that as well. And then thirdly, operations and local support. We've got a monitoring platform and local support services. So yeah, it's all here. It's all yeah. So hopefully your project will go seamlessly, because there's no perfect project, but if something goes wrong, you can talk to someone, right? So just to go over a high level, quite a lot of the smarts is in the battery. We have our proprietary EMS, which connects all of the things inside the BESS system and connects it up to your third-party controller, which, such as PowerSync. So really a lot of the complexity is handled by us before you see it. And we've, done this many times already. I'll go over that a little bit later, but we're pretty blooded in this particular field, the CNI BESS, with very fast FCAS VPP participation. Everything's hosted locally, so we have an AWS server hosted in Australia, so it's all for your cybersecurity requirements, everything like that. And yeah, we test locally as well. So we have a test bench in our factory. I'm in the factory now. We have a test bench here, so we can do all of the integrations ahead of time if they haven't already been tested in the field, which we have with PowerSync. We've got projects operating right now. Yeah, we also have an FCAS meter. So a thing that's probably not well known is we have a sister company called Techco, which is a software development company. So they have an FCAS meter. I think there's a few different options out there, but it can be more seamless to use that particular FCAS meter. In any case, any integrations that you want to handle, we can support with local services, local software developers. Everything's here, mostly in Melbourne. Yeah. Once you've got it all set up, we have a GUI, so you can remotely access this through a VPN, set all your set points with your project partner to ensure that your settings are correct. So you should be able to access this from any computer, whoever's operating the battery. So really dynamic control functionality, yeah. And again, we're there from the start, right? So we can provide you with all of the consulting to make sure that your battery, it's got all the smarts built in already, but there's a lot of things that happen on a site. It's not just the battery there. There's solar. Sometimes there's diesel generators, and on some level you've got to have them all working in tandem as a sort of a microgrid or a hybrid generator, if you will. So yeah, ensuring that you have support all the way along with our experienced engineers is something that we bring to the table consistently. So yeah, let's just talk about how our battery responds. So we have a few different products. We're actually launching a new one next week at Solar and Storage Live. I hope to see you there. But yeah, just to go briefly over it, if the frequency drops out of the band, our battery turns on, hits the required settings in the required time frame, and sustains the power output. There's some granularity here. There's two types of FCAS delivery. There's switched and proportional. We can deliver both, but it's really up to AMO what they decide is the flavor of the day. At the moment, switched is enough, but that's not to say that proportional won't be the gold standard in the future. So very much future-proofed in that sense. So yeah, always good to look at a case study. So this is a really interesting one. This has a peak shaving application, as it's a fleet trucking, EV trucking site. So I think it's a postal service. This got some money from Driving the Nation Fund. Yeah, VPP, peak shaving applications, EV charger optimization. So a really challenging and interesting site. There's a lot of different entities involved in this project as well. And that takes a lot of, I think, people power to make that happen, right? So we're really proud of this work. This is one of many projects that we've done. So yeah, next slide. We've done over 180 megawatt hours of projects. That's not just in the C&I space. We also play in the sub-5 space. So your distributed energy, medium voltage, distributed system, medium voltage connected batteries. We also have a really efficient solution there. So yeah, whatever your project is, DC coupled, AC coupled, maybe it's a solar hybrid, like a solar hybrid retrofit. We've got an answer for it, and we're doing a lot of work in this space. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ollie. Great presentation from both Cliff and Ollie there. So you can see how it's all intertwined. It starts with the modeling, and then we need the controls to be able to make it happen, and obviously the technology and the hardware that can actually respond to the optimization controls. So thanks for everyone's presentation. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to our own Chris Cooper, who's going to share a couple of slides here with us before we're going to get into a bit of a demo from Orchestra. I'll hand over to Chris now, but this slide, it reminds me a lot of a drink driving ad or something like that. Drink responsibly. This is pretty much the same thing for how we're thinking about modeling FCAS and making sure that we are being responsible about it. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Tyler. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Yeah, so I don't want to frighten anyone, but I suppose it is a really important point, which is why I made it right at the head of my slide deck here, is that we do need to model responsibly. And I just want to remind everyone that FCAS, it's complex and also speculative. And so it is really important, unless you're really equipped to handle the complexity and the effort and resource time of actually going to become a market participant. It's very important that you access this opportunity via partnering with companies such as PowerSync, Evo Power, that can essentially take all that complexity off your desk. Even if you are doing that partnering approach and you're out there trying to sort of advise on or sell solutions with these sort of advanced value streams, it's really important that you model responsibly with careful consideration of inputs and outputs, and that you ensure project stakeholders, be they customers or investors, understand the risk associated with such a volatile sort of revenue stream. And we do recommend seeking professional advice. But we are here to help. Orchestra are a platform. We're not here to give you advice on what your input settings should necessarily be. We're not here to tell you what our view of the forecasted revenues in this market are. That's for you to input into the program yourself. And we'll support you where possible, obviously, to make understanding FCAS a piece of cake. But yeah, it's really, the onus is on you as the modeler to bring the right settings to the table. And on that topic, probably the most important decision you make if you are modeling FCAS is what your price data set is, right? So the price settles in 30-minute intervals. And so what we do in Orchestra, we model at interval granularity. And so you have to select at least 1 year of 30-minute interval data, pricing data to use in your analysis. So there's a choice of 2 options. You can use historic pricing that comes in Orchestra, included in your subscription. And it's very easy to take that base year and apply your own forecast to it. And I'll show you how to do that in a moment. The weakness of that is that it's a simplistic view of the future, doesn't have the ups and downs that you're ultimately going to get in such a market. And you really have to choose a representative year. And it's still unclear, well, what is a representative year if you don't know what the future is? But yeah, it's a simple and easy to explain method. Also, you can upload your own price forecast. So if you have a view or you've purchased a forecast of FCAS prices from a third party, then you can upload that up to 20 years in Orchestra. And that will give you that multi-year variability. Some investors will view it as a more bankable approach. There is definitely someone to blame when the forecast is wrong, although these companies typically take no accountability for that, right? They'll disclaimer it to the tilt. They are expensive, and I would go with those that are more transparent about their assumptions, because sometimes they're not very transparent. So, I'm not here to advise you on who to go with when it comes to buying a forecast. We don't review forecasts. It's really your choice, but we cater for both options here. And just quickly, just a bit of a discussion on the forward outlook, because I already see there's questions on it. I suppose the summary is that FCAS revenues have been valuable in recent years, but the market is shallow. And I just want to remind everyone of that point. Typically, the market is, the procurement of FCAS services typically has historically related to the biggest generator or the load in the market, because that's what drives it. If one of those things trip, then essentially there's the need for the backup reserve contingency power. And so that's kind of how it's sized in each market. Obviously there's a lot of batteries, big batteries in particular, that are really good at doing this contingency FCAS. There's a lot of them coming online in coming years. So I suppose there is a broad anecdotal industry consensus that the prices will fall over time. However, people have been saying that for a while, and it hasn't been happening yet. And so, whilst we've got aging generators that keep tripping, we've got interconnector failures, there's more renewables going onto the grid. So there are some counter sort of balancing trends as well, which might mean that, we still see some sustained prices into the future. We just don't know. Again, seek your own advice on the forecast of what the future will hold. So if you are applying a simple historic price curve, the first thing you want to do is go into the settings, and I can show you in the tool what it looks like. You go to the forecast and you want to select an appropriate benchmark year, and then you can apply a simple escalator on that benchmark year. So in my modeling that I'm going to walk you through, I've used a 10% reduction in price year on year. So that's simply de-escalating those prices by 10% a year. I'm assuming that the market value will contract over time. Now, if you have a more nuanced price curve, you can also add you can add specific escalators for each year in your project as well. So a lot of versatility there when it comes to applying your own simple forecasts. Now, obviously, the goal of a modeling platform like Orchestra, our goal is always to mimic reality as best as we can and do it in an easy and transparent way. And so we provide you with two different methods of setting up FCAS controls. And so the first one, which is more akin to what PowerSync is doing, is advanced optimization. And in this instance, what we have is an optimizer that determines the best battery activity in a given interval from all the different options. Because a battery, it's a Swiss Army knife, right? FCAS, we don't want to only do FCAS, we want to do other things as well. And so it's a really good option for extracting maximum value potential. And what happens is that the optimizer then determines dynamically for each interval what the appropriate capacity bid should be. So here you can see the user interface down at the settings for this control profile in FCAS. You select your markets, and then you can select a bid factor selection input, which is akin to the droop setting. As Cliff said, they've achieved 100% with Evo Power, and also your revenue capture accuracy. And now just to touch on these things, yeah, I would seek advice from your controls providers. They should understand where they sit with these inputs, or your FCAS hardware provider. But we provide defaults, and yeah, just seek advice on those. They are complicated. Just touching on what revenue capture accuracy is briefly, it is to account for the delta between a hypothetically modeled project, as you have in Orchestra, and the real world. So when you are running an advanced optimizer like this, one of the challenges is you have to be predicting pre-dispatch what energy consumption at the site is, what the wholesale price might be, or the FCAS price, and solar generation as well. And so I suppose when we're modeling in Orchestra, we have clear view of what those things are, and we do that intentionally, and then we can downgrade those revenues that we capture using this factor. So it really is your fudge factor to align, to account for the optimizer and the pre-dispatch forecast performance of your controls provider. Now for FCAS, you might have a slightly higher setting because it's a more straightforward thing to predict, because you don't need to reserve much capacity. It can be on more often, whereas wholesale arbitrage, we might see a lower revenue capture accuracy. Just quickly on this one, a lot of the FCAS we do see in the market is actually rule-based control, and that is quite simple. You simply set a price threshold and when the price in the FCAS market exceeds that threshold, then the battery exclusively is there idling, waiting for the FCAS event if it is to come. So it stops doing what it was doing, irrespective of the stated charge. We do dynamically adjust still in this approach the capacity that you bid in. For example, if you're doing solar self-consumption as your base activity, there might be no power in the battery if the event is late in the evening, if I've drained that battery. So we will obviously account for that in the modeling. And yeah, next slide, please, Tyler. Yep, so if you are serious about FCAS, there are a few more things you need to know about modeling versus reality. The first one is that we reserve battery capacity for FCAS in the modeling. And so you can see there guidance on how much we reserve. So if you're playing in the 5-minute market, for example, or all of those markets, we'll reserve the maximum capacity that you have selected based on the markets that you're in. And that just ensures that there's always energy available so that you are compliant. Bear in mind, if you do have a very high C rating battery, a very powerful battery versus the energy capacity, then sometimes that can take up quite a bit of your capacity, which doesn't allow it to be used for other things. So that you might not want to participate in the 5-minute markets if you do have a very high C rating. The other thing that to get keep in mind is that in the behind the meter context, FCAS is impacted by site factors, right? So your site load, your solar generation, your export limit, that might impact how much you can actually bid. So you might have a 1 megawatt battery installed, but only be able to put in 200 kilowatts at a given point. And so just keep that in mind. The other thing, it is actually metered at the site level. And what that means is that if you are sort of bidding into an event and a load on your site suddenly trips, that might affect your compliance, right? So these are the things that companies like PowerSync take into account. And you want to make sure that we're using that revenue capture accuracy to ensure that, you know, we're appropriate with our sort of the delta between reality and the modeled as well there. And the last point, just quickly, is that you have to bid in a minimum of 1 megawatt. Obviously, that might require a VPP in the CNI segment if the assets aren't big enough. We do single site modeling in Orchestra, so it's up to the user to figure out how to translate that, the DUID threshold of 1 megawatt into a single site analysis. And so seek some advice there on how that from your controls provider or your DUID on how to do that. Awesome. I'll cut over now and give you a quick demo. Tyler, I just have to turn off the thank you. So the first thing I'll do, here we are in the Orchestra platform, and I'm just going to show you the library first. And so here we have a bunch of FCAS prices, and I'll just show you. So if I just type in 2024, you can see down here we got different NEM markets, and you can see that these prices are ready to go with your modeling. And even if you upload your own forecast, you can see all these sort of on the fly calculated statistics about the market here. You can see average price and percent intervals and compare the different sort of prices in the different markets. So I'm going to actually model a hypothetical New South Wales project for you. And so we'll just have a look at the New South Wales prices. You can see that in 2024, the prices were heavily skewed towards 1 second raise in New South Wales, perhaps more than other markets. And so just keep that in mind when you're reviewing the modeling. And so now I'll just show you how to layer in these advanced battery revenues into your sort of project. So we've got this project in Western Sydney, Seven Hills. It is in the Endeavour network. It's got 650 kilowatt, 620 kilowatt peak demand, 100 kilowatt export limit, and fairly bog standard tariffs. It's got a disaggregated sort of unbundled bill, CNI tariffs, and a time of use demand charge. Food Canning Systems, Inc. Thanks ChatGPT for the creative name. So here we have, firstly, I suppose I want to walk you through how a solar company might be approaching this, because I think, you know, what I want people to get out of this is that actually, even though FCAS is really hard, if you're just a regular solar company that plays in CNI, by partnering with someone like PowerSync and Evo Power, you can actually access these opportunities for your customers, and therefore you may want to model it. And so let's just start how a typical solar company would approach this FCAS Inc. Site, is that they'd probably try and sell a solar system, right? And so here I've run a PV only scenario, and you can see the results here of that scenario. Often solar companies are using solar export percentage as a rule of thumb to size solar systems. And so let's say that my solar company tries to design solar systems with a 15% solar export rate. You can see here that the export rate here is around 15%. So I would probably choose a 500 kilowatt solar system. And you can see that the 500 kilowatt solar system, it looks great on paper. You know, it's got a 5-year payback, and it's, you know, really well sized. You'd think 650 kilowatt peak demand, 500 kilowatt solar sounds about right. Sweet, let's go sell them that. But if you just have a look at what the power of Orchestra is that you can actually sort of bring in some custom charts here. So if I just have a look, I make the x-axis solar size. So I've modeled a range of solar sizes, and you can see that there's a curve to this. So we're looking at net present value. Net present value is an indication of the investment, really, the quality of the investment. So if the customer is trying to choose the optimal solution based on the investment, it's actually going to be 700 kilowatts. And you can see we're getting a much better uplift, 820 versus 890 net present value there. So already a smart solar company that uses Orchestra has just sold essentially a $200,000 more expensive system. So well done, you've just paid for your annual subscription. Now, but this is where it gets really fun, right? When we add batteries. And so the default operation for a solar company is to sell a battery that's relatively simple with solar self-consumption, right? So what I've done is added a bunch of different battery sizes, just a generic best. And by the way, all these numbers include inverter replacements and battery replacements at certain intervals. So it's somewhat accurate. And well, it is very accurate. It's Orchestra. So yeah, we'll make our best to make it accurate. But so yeah, here we have a range of battery sizes. And you can see if I look at the battery sizes here, I'll just make the x-axis battery sizes. And what am I going to do over there? Let's make that battery power. Yep. So this is on the x-axis, I've got kilowatt hours, y-axis kilowatts. And you can see in this scenario, this is the highest net present value. It's a 400 kilowatt hour, 400 kilowatt battery. And if you recall, if we bring back the others, I can bring back the solar only systems. You can see these are the solar only systems. So I have got a drop in my investment quality. So I suppose the value of doing this with the solar self-consumption may well be if you want to boost your energy independence. So you can see energy independence has gone up, but really the economic investment hasn't improved from adding a battery. So you can see there's my energy independence. So it might be a nice option if that's what the customer cares about. Really what we want to get into is what happens when we start looking at advanced battery values, right? And so here I've created a scenario, and I'll dive into the battery page, show how easy it is to set this up. We've got our battery technology. By the way, you could add Evo Powers batteries there, which are all in the library. And this is my full value stack. And so what this is looking at a rich value stack, which is more akin to how PowerSync are offering their services, where you've got peak demand reduction, you've got energy arbitrage and tariff arbitrage. So, and you've got contingency FCAS. And in this example, I've gone with the bid factor and the settings that PowerSync recommend, but I've turned off my 1 second FCAS. Just touching on how the wholesale arbitrage works. So essentially in this instance, we've got a fairly, conservative revenue capture accuracy. What we're doing is installing a child meter. Using the small generation aggregator framework. So we put a specific child meter. The battery sits behind that child meter on the site, and that allows it to have its cake and eat it too. It can perform wholesale arbitrage via that child meter, which is an on-market, fully exposed tariff. And it can reduce peak demand at the site as well as participate in FCAS. So it's like the perfect scenario for advanced battery value. And I'll show you the results here. So if we go back to the analysis that only takes about 40 seconds to simulate all these different battery sizes, we can see if I click, yep, we got that loaded there now. So we can see already that same battery that was at about 790 net present value for solar self-consumption is now at 1.2 million. And already our earnings have gone from the simple solar size of 100,000 per year earnings up to almost 200. We're at 190 here. Now, if I go in, there's a few things you might want to do at this point. You could apply a business model. So these do not have a business model applied. So for example, you might have a split of revenues that might pay for some of PowerSync services. You can definitely apply all of that in Orchestra. But we might want to just quickly view an analysis to show you what happens as we dive deeper. So if we look here at the breakdown of those revenues, you can see that FCAS is in pink. Solar's revenues are yellow. green is energy arbitrage. So it was really quite a good year for energy arbitrage. Peak demand reduction is there as well. And so you can see if you click here, FCAS with 1 second turned off was 4.5% of my total revenue. And you can see the breakdown of revenue there, right? So rich charts are here to show you the insights of what's actually happening. Now, if I go over to my other solutions, so all of my save solutions are up here, I can simply toggle. Let's now look at 1 second FCAS included. And you can see that the revenue goes up for FCAS substantially because, no surprises, 1 second was the main game in New South Wales in my base year that I'm using. So the pink is a lot more. It's now up to 10% of revenue. So it really is like a nice cream on top, FCAS. A lot of the work is done by the other value streams. It's about layering that value on. And you can see the breakdown of the 1 second FCAS there in year one is adding about $13,000 additional revenue. So that's the power of that. And so I suppose here, other things you might want to do at this point, you can explore all these charts, right? Really rich charts. You can see how much the battery is being used. You can see all sorts of things. We've got all these things. We've got, rich breakdown of bills as well. So we can verify all the different line items. You can see the bills before and after with $300 to $100,000. And you can see with confidence and high accuracy how those charges have changed. We can go down into the intervals and see, okay, well, what was driving revenue at the daily level, right? And so what we're doing here, we're preloading the annual view. And you can see here, this is week one, which is beginning of 2025. And you can see that FCAS did quite well this week. Now I can see actually what's happened. I can see what my battery did, energy prices, and these are the FCAS prices. So there was some weird event overnight at the beginning of January here where high raised prices were there. And you can also see demand reduction impacts. So really rich breakdown. You might want to share this with a customer. You can create a link. You can, set the expiry. You can also create a sales proposal. This is integrated with Microsoft Office. So you can just search your own templates that you've uploaded and generate in one click a custom sales proposal. You can fully brand this analysis to your company's theme. This is all included in the base subscription, by the way. And you can change and turn off any charts that are irrelevant. Now, I did one more analysis. This is the final one. What I wanted to do is look at, okay, we had a 100 kilowatt export limit. What happens if we relax that, right? And so just quickly, I ran this scenario where I went in and changed the export limit. So we go to Endeavour and they're like, well, it costs 50 grand to boost your export limit. Let's see if that's worthwhile. And what happens, you hit run, it comes out in the wash whether it is. And you can see that 400 kilowatt system, we've just lifted that net present value up to 1.5 million. Now, if we look at the optimal battery size, it's actually a bigger battery. It's this one here, which is a 1.2 megawatt hour, 800 kilowatt battery. And we're at over 2 million net present value, right? And so what we're looking at here is actually, let me just change this. You can see this is the adjusted. The dark blue is with my export limit relaxed at 500, and the light blue is with it at 100. And this is really the advanced tooling that helps you take a net present value from down at 800,000 all the way up to 2 million, right? And this is achievable for solar companies partnering with expert partners like PowerSync and EvoPower. It's achievable today. And so really powerful use of a modeling platform like Orchestra. Tyler, if you want to cut back to the summary slide, then we'll take some questions.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that, Chris. I'm just going to
One
share.
more slide. I'll stop sharing. Do I have to hit a button?
Technicalities. Stop sharing.
Done.
There you go. Can you see my screen?
Got it.
Yeah.
Yep. Got it. We're back.
We're back. Perfect. So here's the final slide, just with a bit of a summary of analysis from Chris.
Yeah, so you can see there what we went is from a 500 kilowatt system all the way up to, tripling our earnings, over almost 2.5xing our net present value. And for a solar company, we're selling not $500,000 a kit, but $1.8 million a kit, right? So, what might be the respect level for whoever sold this system might be, pretty good, even at that rule of thumb pricing. But what we've just shown you is how to reach insane respect levels as a solar salesperson, or even a consultant advising someone on what they should be doing.
Yeah, pretty impressive stuff there. And so great to see lots and lots of questions coming in. I think, Chris, you've actually managed to answer a lot of these throughout the presentation that have come in. So I just want to thank everybody for attending today. We've got about 10 minutes left to answer questions, so we've got some good ones I'm going to go through. And I'm going to hand some stuff over to Ollie, some stuff over to Cliff, and also to Chris. So just some of the questions we've got here. One was around, Chris, I mean, you've showed a great demonstration today about how to model FCAS into a CapEx model. But the question about Orchestra is how can we then go and split those revenue shares out between the controls provider or anybody else that's involved?
Yep. Well, I suppose we've got a feature for that. It's called the Business Model Builder, and it's probably the world's most advanced business model sort of tool. And so what it enables, we've seen a lot of innovation in batteries and VPPs in Australia, and we wanted to build a tool that could cater for the versatility of advanced business models we were seeing. And so the Business Model Builder enables you to do just that. You can share costs and revenues with as many different stakeholders involved in the project as you like. And you can, instantly change the business model and see the impact on every party's cash flows. We also have a feature, a one-click thing called Goal Find, which optimizes the business model for the site in question. So if you have, say, a target revenue or investment hurdle rate as a funder of some battery, for example, if that business model includes financing, you can click that button and instantly it will calibrate some revenue share or a payment, like a PPA, to that project. So don't have time to go there today, but it's a really exciting feature, and yeah, it's part of the sell plan, and so a lot of our users are enjoying that feature.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. Cliff, I've got one for you. I think there's been a few of these questions coming through. Thanks for everybody sending their questions through, but a little bit of a crystal ball, but there's a lot of questions coming through. And I know Chris touched on it earlier, but what does the future have in store for the FCAS market? Everyone's asking, yes, things are great right now, but what does it look like? Knowing that these are longer term investments, yeah, it's a little bit of a curveball for you, but how have you been answering it, Cliff?
We get asked this a lot. I mean, if I did have a crystal ball, I probably wouldn't be here. I'd be on the beach in the Bahamas. But look, realistically, I think our approach to modeling is to be fairly conservative and transparent where we can. To Chris's point earlier, transparency is an important part in making sure that this is all parties involved in the modeling understand it. To make it brief, we typically do a backcast. So we've done a lot of analysis around the sort of revenue capture available for the last 7 years. It is a changing marketplace. Oftentimes, this is up to the customer. We typically use a median case, and then we look at overall market trends to forecast out how those market returns might play out. So, we've got more detail on this on a state-by-state basis and a market-by-market basis that we can provide offline. But look, at a high level, what we're seeing at the moment in the market, FCAS contingency revenues might be coming off as roughly at about 10% per annum, but wholesale market revenues are increasing by 10% or more per annum for these batteries. So So, as long as you understand, and we can provide, we've got a lot of modeling documentation to support what the numbers we put out there. As long as you understand that, and as long as those revenues are tied to actual capabilities in market, that's why we rely on publicly available information where we can to prove out our actual revenue capture, so that everything that's modeled is fair. That's our standard approach, and typically a backcast with market trends we view as potentially a more while it might be simplistic, it probably provides a fairly accurate view of the future. There was one question here that I thought was quite interesting that I might touch on as well, is just looking at specific time periods. The thing with FCAS, and it's a capacity-based market, these revenues are very concentrated often, and the same is true for wholesale to a slightly lesser degree, but these revenues are often occurred in a matter of a few hours over the course of the year. 80% of your revenue might be from 10 hours of capacity, or or actual discharge and charge during the year. So, I think having a control system that can really get you as much value as possible and ensure that it's available when those events occur is very important to realize those revenues. But yeah, those revenues can be very, very heavily concentrated, sometimes seasonally, sometimes unpredictably because of bushfires or storms.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that, Cliff. Jumping in, and feel free to, if you see any more that you'd like to jump in with, let me know.
There was, look, there's a couple of questions
Yeah,
about export.
while you're on a roll.
While I'm on a roll, there's a couple of questions about export limits. Orchestra can model all of that for you. So rely on Orchestra. That's one of the settings you can input, is the export limit, import limits, and you can change those and see. I think Chris touched on that. So that's there. I guess that the question on how can you validate the offers being put forward by providers. I think, again, tying it back to actual performance and registrations in market is where possible, publicly available information is an important factor there. The frequency performance payments, those are really only linked to purely front of meter assets. They don't really apply to behind the meters. So, but yeah, and if you're participating actively in frequency markets, you're usually going to have a net benefit there. So I think those are most of the questions I had to answer for you.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that, Cliff. One of them that potentially you or even Ollie might be able to weigh in on, but there's a good question here just about, hey, great, let's look at the FCAS opportunities, but what are the additional hardware devices that need to be installed on a site to be able to have access to those markets? And what sort of, do we have a ballpark sort of cost that would raise the capex of the project by? I'm not sure who's best to weigh in on that. Yeah,
I mean, Ollie might be able to mention. They obviously have their own frequency meter solution. We also provide that within our kit, and this is going to change dramatically across different providers. Well, not dramatically, but it may vary from provider to provider. Our typical fixed hardware cost is around about 13 to 15K per site. There's a few nuances there, but that's the rough metric.
Yeah, sorry, I'll weigh in there. I think that's there's definitely a site level optimization that we can look at. I think we're in early stages of the kit on the market. I think there's potential to, let's say, reduce the site works, reduce the redundancy in the kit. That's going to take time and partnerships, but yeah, there's potential for that.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that, Ollie. There's a lot of stuff coming in a little bit about using historical data sets and obviously the risks associated with that. I know Chris spent a bit of time on this earlier, saying that if you are looking to get serious about this, there are third parties out there that provide forward curves, so you can get more bankable feasibility modeling done in there. But Chris, do you want to just touch on again sort of the first stages of feasibility modeling and why historical data sets are a good place to start with anyway?
Yeah, look, I suppose when we don't really know the future, the past is an okay. It gives us some data points, right, to start a conversation. And so if you are doing FCAS at scale, or you're delivering decent projects, you really probably want to proceed down the path of starting with historic, and some simple rule of thumb extrapolations or escalators, and then moving into procuring some commercial FCAS forecast. Now, I saw there were some questions about where do we buy those things. Frankly, I haven't done any market research on them. We don't advise anyone on, we don't have relationships with any company at all. We're really about independence. And so I would, there's some companies that do the wholesale spot forecast. There's a bunch of them. And that's probably the best place to start, is communicate with those companies and ask them if they have an FCAS forecast, because I know some of them do. And then I would ask them questions about how they came up with these numbers, right? Ask them to share insights into the assumptions. They might have, because some of them won't be that forthcoming, and that might be a bit of a red flag. The more information they can share about the underlying model they have built to come up with this price curve that they just sold you for $20,000, right? The more reliable perhaps it might be. Now, some of these companies trade strictly off their brand reputation, and that might be great for investment bankability, but I would still go and do that due diligence properly by asking the right questions.
Yeah, perfect. Cliff, I just saw another one come in just directed at you. Just to clarify a little bit around, minimum battery size, because we did have some stuff in there, knowing that you need to be 1 megawatt as a minimum. But how does that work in an aggregated format?
So yeah, that's a part of our optimization. It includes both the site level optimization to make sure that customer and that specific site is generating as much savings and revenue as possible. But we also have a portfolio of assets, and we aggregate those and bid those in megawatt chunks into the market. So we take care of all of that. There's theoretically no minimum cost no minimum size, I should say, from a kilowatt perspective or kilowatt hour perspective that we would aggregate. But the reality is 15K in fixed hardware for our solution does not lend itself to the residential sector. So I don't think you're going to put a $12,000 fully installed Tesla Powerwall, put another 15 grand worth of our kit on there to aggregate it into our VPP. So there's honestly, it comes down to the modeling you would do in Orchestra. I think the fixed costs, from our perspective, typically bottom out at around 50 kilowatt to 100 kilowatt of dispatchable capacity. But that,
yeah, great.
I don't want to rule out any projects. We're happy to have a look at any and all. But if they are 5 kilowatts, they're probably not going to be in our wheelhouse.
Just jump in there as well,
yeah.
if I may. There was some questions around residential and also utility scale, and the same rules apply. Yes, residential can participate in these markets. It might not be viable for the 1 second because of all the hardware needs. You can definitely model residential VPPs in Orchestra as you model utility scales, bigger than 5 megawatt systems as well. There's nothing to stop you modeling those things in Orchestra.
Yeah, excellent. And then I think I've got one here for Ollie, which is just more around you did say, Ollie, that you offer both AC coupled and DC coupled battery solutions. Is there benefit of having one over the other, or same? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I think there's a bit of nuance to it, and requires a good modeling tool. But really, if you're I think fundamentally there's solar inverters and then they're battery inverters, and they're not the same, although people call them both inverters. There's a little bit more complexity and nuance to battery PCS, as it's commonly called. It can go up, it can go down. It's not just unidirectional like a solar inverter. So first of all, if you're DC coupling with a battery provider, you get access to a PCS, so you can participate in all of the different markets, the 1 second up, 1 second down, etc. But not only that, you also get more energy out of your solar system, and you can charge behind the PCS on the DC bus, basically meaning that you're not you only pay for one inverter system, and you're not being limited by one inverter system to another inverter system. There's energy losses there. So there's definitely benefits. It does become tricky, but we have some pretty good solutions across our portfolio.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Guys, does anyone see any other questions they want to have a shot at answering in there? There's been so many that have come through. We will reach out after the webinar, and we'll be able to get in touch with you. Specifically, there's some very, very specific ones in there. So happy to follow on with those after. But does anyone else have anything they want to add before Ollie? Happy there? Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming. We've had, a huge amount of registrations today and a bunch of people on the call. So we hope you've enjoyed everything that's been delivered. Once again, feel free to get in touch with us at Orchestra. We do have a three-week trial that you can opt into, and we do very much support you in getting started and set up. And like Chris said, it is good, especially working in this very advanced space of FCAS. It really does need other parties to weigh in, such as PowerSync and Evo, to make sure that if you are serious about looking at these opportunities in the market, there is a part with the modeling. There's also a part to make sure you have the right inputs from the controls provider, and then also making sure you've got the right equipment at the other end that can actually deliver into these markets. So I just want to say big thanks to Cliff and Ollie for joining us today from PowerSync and Evo. I believe everyone's going to be at Solar and Storage up in Brisbane event. Is that right? Ollie, you're going to be there? Or someone's going to be there from... Yeah, you'll be there. Cliff, you'll be there. So, if anyone's going to that event, please hit us up and go say hi to everybody there. We will also send the recording out of this webinar. So for everyone that's registered, and also for people that are interested in this, they can sign up afterwards, and we will send out the recording. We'll also send out the slide deck. So in the slides, I know we didn't have time to show it today, but Evo has a really nice video in a link. So we're going to put that in the slide deck as well. So you can have a look at that. And really exciting to see your new product that you're launching next week, Ollie. It's going to be great and very revolutionary into the battery market. So
first peek, nobody's seen it yet. So
sneak peek. So everybody will be able to access that video in the next hopefully next couple of hours once we start sending out the recordings. So once again, on behalf of Orchestra, I'd like to thank everyone today for joining. I hope you've learned something. Please feel free to send more questions through afterwards, and we look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Thanks a lot. Thanks all the speakers. Thanks for coming today.